All right, welcome back to Wild Outdoor Living. I'm out on this ride today, mostly because I need to get in shape. I'm not really sure what I'm going to be doing this summer in terms of trips, but I want to be ready for what I eventually decide to do. So I'm getting out here and trying to build up my endurance after doing just, the typical 5 to 10 miles of the winter commuting scene. So be doing a 37-mile ride today, and I figured this would be a good time to do the voiceover for the question and answer segment that I said I was going to do. So yeah, let's jump into our first question. So Michael Munson said, I have a 920 but immediately swapped out the hydro brakes and bar ends for a Shimano 10-speed drivetrain. My question is, have you had any issues with your TRP brakes on your cold commutes? A caveat question to this, do you always store your bikes inside when at home, work, or school? I've heard stories of cold temps affecting certain hydro brakes, and I would prefer not to test that when heading into work. So, Michael, I would say first of all, I do typically store my bikes inside all the time. They are not always, or haven't always been, in a temperature controlled environment. So like this past winter, for a couple of the months, a bunch of my bikes were in a garage that is separate from our apartment, and there was no heating in there whatsoever. So if it was negative 15 or negative 20 outside, it was negative 20 in the garage as well. And I kept the 920 out there, kept both of the 920s out there actually, kept my mountain bikes out there, and I didn't have any problems at all. Last winter, my Superfly would often be at school outside for 6 to 8 hours at a time in various temperatures, and I honestly never had a problem in terms of the hydraulic brakes. I've actually done a little bit of research on this, and it seems that mineral oil based brakes, so the TRPs and the Shimano brakes in particular, their seals tend to start having issues around negative 15, negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, which is ridiculously cold. I ride down to negative 15, negative 20 occasionally, maybe once or twice in a winter, but it's I don't like doing it. I know a lot of people do it all the time, but most of the time the coldest I'm riding down to on a regular basis is maybe negative 5, usually about 0. And there's tons of days that are, 10 to 15 positive Fahrenheit. So I'm almost never at the point where that could be considered an issue for those brakes. The DOT fluid brakes are considered to be better for cold temperatures. So your SRAM guides and some of the other Avids, because they use DOT fluid, they won't even notice the cold until about negative 30. And even then, on both of these brakes, they might get a little sluggish at negative 15, negative 20, or in the case of the DOT fluid brakes, negative 30. They might get a little sluggish, but from what I read, failures aren't really very common even below that. The lever feel gets bad, but then once they warm up, they're back to normal. So cable actuator brakes are considered to be a little bit more reliable in that sense because they don't have these seal issues. But even they can have issues in the cold as well. Cables get stiff, the lubricants inside the housings changes just about the same rate that hydraulic brakes do, and so there can be changes there. And the exposed cables can also freeze up and cause problems. So anytime you're riding in temperatures that cold, negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to have issues. But if you're above 0 or even above negative 5 degrees Fahrenheit, none of the brakes are really going to have an issue reliability wise. And for me, I feel like the modulation you get from hydraulic brakes is totally worth it in the wintertime. In terms of having grip on the road with my tires is so sensitive, I like having the extra modulation that you get from hydraulic brakes. So there's less of a chance of me actually locking them up because they are so easy to modulate. So I really prefer them in the wintertime. And nowadays, I take my bikes out, I ride them in the winter, and then they go right back inside. So they're almost never sitting outside, so for me it's not a concern. But even in the times when they have been outside for hours or or even days on end. That haven't given me a problem at all. So the only issue I've actually had with the TRP brakes, in particular the Hiluxes that are on the 920, on my bike, on the 2016 920, the rotor, it wasn't the best design from TRP, and it works great as a ton of power, but because the holes are so big, the pads tend to catch a little bit on the rotor holes as it goes by, so it makes this popping kind of catching sound. It's really an annoying sound. I need to go ahead and change those rotors out. TRP says it's an alignment issue, but you'll notice that the very next year, 2017, they've come out with a new rotor. My wife's 920 has the new rotor, and it's as smooth as silk, and it's never had a problem like that. Not really a reliability issue for the 920, just an annoyance on those particular rotors. But other than that, they've done really well. Yeah, personally, I would not worry about cold temperatures and hydraulic brakes. If you're riding at the temperatures where hydraulic brakes will even feel a little bit different, so negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, you've got a lot of other things to contend with. So your brakes are probably going to be the least of your worries. Okay, so I get this next question a lot, and it's not really a specific question. It's on a few of my videos, and it's always like the 920 versus this, or the 920 versus that, or this bike versus that bike, which one's better? And it's hard to answer these questions because it really depends on what you're wanting to do with the bike and how you want the bike to behave. So even if two people want to do the same route, maybe they want to do the Great Divide, for instance, they want to do exactly the same route, but maybe they have different preferences in what they want out of that bike. So the answer to this question is really to begin to understand geometry charts a little bit better for yourself, and then really compare those bikes side by side on geometry first before you even start looking at components. Because a lot of times what this question ends up being on this channel is the 920 versus, and then it'll be some like adventure gravel bike or gravel racer type bike, and it's a bike that is kind of marketed towards this adventure crowd. And so they've put in rack and fender mounts on it, and it's supposed to be a little bit more utilitarian, but it's really not a touring bike. And that's often what the 920 is getting compared to if people don't understand the geometry charts. So I mean, these are great bikes, and they're going to be really responsive, and they're going to be really versatile, and they're going to be awesome. However, especially if you look at the chainstay length and the wheelbase overall, and then some of the head angle and seat tube angle numbers, and especially the reach and stack, I'm beginning to name off everything, but I mean the bottom bracket drop as well. You start looking at these, and you'll notice that a lot of these bikes, they're going to be very different than the 920. The 920 is first and foremost a traditional touring bike, and then it's mixed with a mountain bike. So that's why I like to call it an off-road touring bike instead of an adventure bike, because a lot of these new adventure bikes in this category the cycling industry has come out with, they're gravel race bikes made to be a little bit more versatile. So if you've ridden a 920 or a Surly Ogre, or a Salsa Fargo, or one of these like real off-road touring bikes, and you've ridden a cyclocross bike or a gravel race bike, you'll know that they're in completely different camps, even if they have similar tire clearances. Or again, if you've ridden like a Surly Long-Haul Trucker or Trek 520, these are the Trek 920s and the Salsa Fargos and the Surly Ogres and Trolls. They're kind of an evolution of the traditional road touring bike. That they are meant to be bike packing bikes in a way, but they're also, like, at their core still full-on touring bikes. And these other bikes can certainly be used for touring, but they are a little bit lighter, they're a lot shorter, and so they'll be more responsive, but they're not going to feel as great with a really full touring load. So you may not need a Trek 920, but you certainly should be able to look at the numbers and get a feel for what these different bikes are going to be used well for. So I can't really answer those questions. specifically all the time. It requires a much longer conversation. But really, when you're looking at different bikes, you've got to look at the geometry numbers, and then for your own sake, you should be looking at the you should be looking at the components as well, for and know that they're going to suit your needs. But components can be swapped. The frame geometry is really that really important thing that's going to define the character of a bike first and foremost. Leave your comments below what bike packing or touring route you guys think I should do this summer. Unfortunately, it's looking like I'm getting busier and busier this summer. There's a really good chance I'm going to be in Oregon. So if you guys know of any bike packing routes there that are your favorites, put them in the comments below. Or, anything basically in North America that is somewhat reasonable. Put them in the comments below. I'm really trying to decide what big projects I'm going to go for either this summer or especially next summer. So would love to have you guys' input on that, and we'll catch you later.